All right, look, this is why everything that's going on with Colt 45, we'll call him, so that we avoid algorithmic uh, shadow bannings and all that. Two things are really dangerous. The one that should be obvious to anyone who gives a fuck about being a free person, about not being told what to do by the government, literal like 1984 Orwell shit. Okay, V for Vendetta shit. Anyone who cares about not living under that should be concerned about the fact that it is obviously the people in power are prosecuting their number one threat to staying in power, while accusing him of breaking the law to stay in power. That's bad, right? But there's a worse one. There is a worse one. They've indicted his lawyers as co-conspirators. Now, I just watched a clip of Vivek Ramaswamy talking about the fact that, attorneys doing their job, offering legal theory as advice, which is allowed, for them to be co-conspirators. What this does is it chills the legal profession from wanting to represent anyone who is fighting for their freedom. Oh, well, you have a right to an attorney, and if you cannot afford one, one shall be appointed. They don't do that out of a pool of private lawyers. They do not enslave Lawyer, and Lawyer LLC. People volunteer that are lawyers and attorneys, or it's an internship thing as they're getting their Juris Doctorate, that there's going to be times when you're going to go do public defender representation. Here's the problem. Most of the time, these public defenders are people who one day want to be like the county attorney, so they're buddies with the county attorney, who is the prosecutor. So, effectively, the public defender's office may be across the street from the district attorney's office. They are all on the same team. I know people personally that got into trouble, did not understand their rights, and were shanghaied basically into felony until somebody somewhere contacts a private lawyer and says, hey, I need you to help my buddy, please. And this private lawyer said, hey, man, we're going to get this reversed because what happened was you had a person with a low IQ, and maybe the question they ask everyone in the process, would you like to waive your rights? The answer should always be fuck no and fuck you. That's it. And he said, what do you mean? They said, well, that'll make the process faster. Okay, cool, let's do that. Waive your rights. Speedy trial, jury, all that, whatever, straight to conviction. And even if you don't waive your rights, your public defender may not feel obligated to inform you that that is what they're asking you to do. The public defender just wants to get this thing through. They're going to make sure, supposedly, that you've got your rights upheld, but a lot of the time they work with the other side. If you cannot afford one who you know you may not be able to trust will be appointed for you. It may be in the interest of his expediency to just let this one go, or he thinks you're obviously guilty, or is phoning it in. And you know what? I'm willing to be wrong if there's ones that do otherwise. I'm sure there's good-hearted people who get into that profession who do that. But it's going to chill anyone from wanting to do it. I don't want to get debanked. I don't want to get sued. I don't want to become a co-conspirator for following the law. And this is what it all comes back to. Everything that Trump did and asked people to do was done through the legal means and keeping it legal. And there were people who had legal constitutional power to do things that were in line with what he was seeking that simply refused to do so and claimed that they lacked that power. I hope you're following along. What this means is that people who were in power, who had the power to do something, did nothing. Evil prospers when good men do nothing. Or when bad men do nothing. Weak men do nothing. Pussy pants. I'm sorry, it's these allergies are crazy. Asking a governor to decertify an election and send it back to the representatives to discuss. asking for an audit and receiving only a recount. There's a difference. There is a difference, legally speaking, in those things. I've watched all the states that did do audits. I watched them. They all have live streams when they do it so that everyone can see it, because this is how a transparent system is meant to work. And the places where they refuse to do that are the places where people were like, hey, there's an issue. And now they're saying, oh, it's illegal to say, hey, I think there might be an issue there. Imagine only being able to get a crooked defender to go up against a crooked DA or CA or whatever, state's attorney, anyone of that, attorney general, federal. Imagine no lawyer wants to touch your case, even though it's legit. Imagine Kyle Rittenhouse not being able to get an attorney, even though it was obvious self-defense, and that kid got sent up. Life in prison, death penalty, castration, double castration. Or imagine him getting his acquittal like he did, and then sanctions on the attorneys for even trying. That's what's happening in the election cases. The attorneys that have worked for Kari Lake, the state who is in control, they're controlled by the people that are being fought and accused of fraud, with their state attorney general seeking court sanctions, fines against the attorneys simply for being her attorneys. Back to the Future Part 2, the justice system works swiftly now that they've abolished all lawyers. This is not a good thing. It's not a good thing. People are like, yeah, because lawyers. No, people don't like lawyers for two reasons. One, they cost a lot of money for a good one, which most people don't have. Two, they're generally objective when it comes to the case, much like a doctor, which is how you're actually supposed to be. And people don't like that. It doesn't sit well with the common. But it's what's necessary. I've met many lawyers. They're great dudes. It's not even like, yeah, some can be assholes. Everyone's like that. There are some people who are just assholes. But it's terrifying to think about. It's worse than the idea of coming for your goods. They're going to make it so that you can't get a lawyer. Going to make it so that you can't say what you think about the government that you're supposed to have a hand in choosing. There are words that describe this state of affairs, and these words get used and people don't like to hear them. They've been made into stop thought phrases. They're things that you hear and it's like your brain just shuts it out. You go into autopilot and you don't even realize it. There are terms for this. And what's worse, we already know, if you've actually been paying attention to January 6th, that this government trying to do these things is also just looking to set up more people to try and do a thing to get them out. It's the unfortunate reality of why it's being done through the legal process. But look at the Republican-controlled House of Representatives. Are they moving forward with their impeachment? Are they on vacation? Will the Senate be able to do anything about it? Is there some kind of a midterm election in November that I'm unaware of? Because I didn't think it happened on odd-numbered years. As long as you're not in the house of cards when it collapses, a collapsing house of cards is not like the end of the world. But things get different. It goes back to kind of the Old West. It gets wild. You live in the pioneer country, the roving raid bands, and all the same behaviors that people 200 years ago plus had to deal with will be a thing again, just from different sources. goods will be extremely hard to come by if you're not able to produce them yourself. And barter will rule. I think, as I recall, a long time ago when I first began the process of seeking enlightenment, ascending spiritually, and all of that, the real input bender, I had figured out that the Americas are really not meant to be governed. No one has been able to hold on to it for that long. Some countries have their own independence. You also notice that countries that form within that area also have been infiltrated either by corporate interests or countries like ours. All the stuff that's gone on to cause places to be shitholes. Heard the story on Timcast IRL of talking to a guy from El Salvador who said, yeah, we're moving back. They made it safe. It's unfortunate, I think, that the way that they did it may have been a little draconian. But at the same time, what they were going up against was something that kind of requires that. But now they're trying to make it a Bitcoin paradise, I guess. Good for them, right? The thing is, in a situation like that, the collapse happens. If you aren't already in possession of your Second Amendment rights physically, in a real and practical way, it's going to be infinitely harder to get reliable, accurate, serviceable things. Now you can work on making some pipe things. I'm using careful words here, I'm talking about pew pew. But it's a lot more difficult than you think. And you're also going to have to be able to create gunpowder at that point. Or you're back to bows, spears, and arrows. Catapults. It's an ungovernable land. The idea of freedom is pretty cool, but codifying it is difficult. And maybe something will come out of this. Maybe cooler heads will prevail and good will win. It's spread out enough that it's very difficult for that centralized organization to really do anything, and it comes then down to states. States can be infiltrated as well, though, at those levels, which means that even on that level, provincial governance may be impossible on this continent in the true long term. Every empire in central Mesoamerica had failed for the same reasons. What makes us any different? Archaeologically speaking, I think nothing. The tribes, which are the states and cities, have their own thing. And unless a conqueror comes in with their diseases and spreads it around, rendering the people less and less until it's easier for them to colonize, and the process repeats. It seems like maybe that's just what it's been. But none of them ever are able to last. Knowing your rights and informed consent are important. Informed consent needs to be an enumerated constitutional right. I am certain of this now. That needs to be a thing. Every state needs to have a right to informed consent. And then nationally, the U.S. Constitution needs to include an amendment enumerating, stating directly that informed consent is also a natural right. If life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are, the course of that includes specifically the right to informed consent. And that being a right, basically, once you normalize that, internalize that in everyone, you have a right to know. The nature of the law changes very clearly. It's more of a civil thing. The system should be built so that you can publicly sue people for defamation, so that you can publicly sue people for any other damage, rather than laws saying you cannot say this. Or cutting people out from being able to say things because they want people to think something else is true, even if it isn't. But people have a right to know. You have a right to say no. The consent of the governed is itself somewhat enumerated in the Declaration of Independence, in that equal application of the law, which we are all seeing is really not true, and the consent of the governed. Those two things are required. And if the one is gone, the other one is basically gone, or it should be. Why are you consenting to governance by bodies and organizations, groups? They're telling you what to do. They're charging you money. They're forcing the technology that you're using, the technology providers and all of the platforms and everything to either do as they say or give them information. Why would you consent to governance by that? Why would you say, yeah, sure, I'll do what you say? Is it because they're well armed? You should be well armed too, right? The second protects the first. The first is very important, but there's other ones too, that the government cannot just come into your domicile. That you have a right to just be like, yeah, no, I'm not talking about it. You have a right to representation, which they're trying to chill. You have a right to face your accuser in the legal sense. Who's the accuser? I think with informed consent, victimless crime changes, dissolves. The things that are more important are the things that victimize, that harm. And a system that culturally eventually gets people to stop doing that is a good thing. But the neo-Maoist cultural revolution thing going on right now and the ensuing government totalitarianism. Oh, I said a bunch of those words that make you want to stop listening. You probably clicked off already. They're not doing it right, and they're not doing it in good faith. Done in good faith would be courts upholding the rights of the people, understanding the precedent that is being set in their decisions. So, those things are going to play out. It is ultra, ultra dangerous to have it so that if you want America to be free, you want freedom to be a thing, that you'll be prosecuted, that attorneys will hesitate to represent you, and that whatever you get from the public defender's office is almost certainly going to be perfectly in line with what the state is doing. That is terrifying. That is worse, in my opinion, in the long run, for everyone and for everything, for freedom, for rights, for democracy, for any of it, right? Democracy, that's the thing everybody wants to talk about, right? Even your right to vote, you have to be certain that the system you're using to vote is legitimate. And if you are not allowed to question it, and if you do question it, you will be criminally charged, put in jail, or worse. That's not democracy at all. I hope anyone who is seeing this that did not understand before what's going on maybe has a better understanding. It's bad. They can come for a rich elite guy like him. They can come for you. And just because you're on their side means nothing. It means nothing whatsoever. Robespierre. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.